or imaged. Simply by saying, how do you see cooperation, working on solutions, and taking initiatives, etc., versus seeing competition, blaming, and taking directions. If the imagery is consistent with the teaming goals being sought, encouragement takes place. The forms of consistency can take place in reinforcement activity, redirecting questions when images are compared between team members who are communicating, and asking questions as opposed to making comments regarding the validity of concepts or images. If the picture team members are painting as they explain how they see the new model working is dissonant from the desired goal, they can be asked, how does that match with the new goal or what it would look like? Use questions, not comments, in getting to how the goals should be conceptualized. This process was utilized in a project our organization, Lindemood Bell Learning Processes, did with the Motorola Corporation. We used Motorola's Total Customer Satisfaction Team Competition process, which won a gold medal for our team at the World Competition. It was a project directed towards a systemic literacy development program for manufacturing personnel. This was necessary because the communication necessary to even do the teaming process was not possible in many ways due to substandard language processing skills. We used imagery processing exchange procedure in our team problem-solving process, and it was extremely effective. All of the manufacturing personnel that went through the process were trained in the use of the comparative imagery processing technique in both their literacy development skills and in the communication strategies in their respective self-directed work team responsibilities. An especially promising ancillary effect of this training was that this project involved working with 18 different cultures and languages. We found that the use of imagery as a metacognitive instructional and team problem-solving tool was the inter- and intracultural medium through which information could be shared. They all used imagery even though their languages were different. This was unique because it allowed for the influence of culture, which is a known issue for many organizations, and management decisions. In the case of this project, cultural differences were used as an asset. If an employee does have negative views on the teaming process because of their culture, that can be used as part of the teaming process by helping them verbalize those views from their mental representations. This activates the imagery expression process and substantially enables the teaming process to begin. It was found that the team building was more effective through the common human communication medium of mental representations, and that it actually culminated in more productive business metrics, such as many more I recommends. Virtually all business metrics were enhanced, such as productivity, cycle time, and quality. This included a savings to the corporation over $500,000 during the first year of implementation. How much integrity does this process have? It is clear that the decision to go to self-directed work teams is based on the need to become more competitive, to seek additional advantage. And using teams in business leads to higher profits and/or enhanced productivity. It can be said that there is a direct correlation between the learning curve of this process and how effective the results translate into key business numbers. If it is true that our goal is to achieve self-generating, self-directed teams, then the learning conditions cannot be overlooked. If the learning conditions are directly related to the use or lack of use of imagery, then why not consciously be aware of how to use those factors? Perhaps Einstein said it best when he said, "If I can't picture it, I can't understand it." If he is right, we have no choice but to ensure the success of teaming by focusing on the process. When the processing integrity works, the content or goals will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Worthington. Let us begin the second question and answer session. We are now going to take the first question coming via fax. It's coming from Brazil, from Fundação Vanzolini, Sao Paulo. What is the role of information technologies in the management of teams?
The role of information technologies in teams can be varied. It's certainly not a mandate that information technologies have to be utilized in the teaming approach, so the role can be varied. The issue on the utilization of information technologies is that to effectively address their usage, the factors or the procedures that are used within the business that are assumed by information technologies absolutely must be included in the brainstorming in terms of the technologies being a component in achieving consensus. Clearly, information technologies have two possibilities. They can be extremely empowering if utilized effectively in the teaming process, or they can be a terrible liability if not used correctly, because people, for example, would tend to focus more on the information and the use of information as opposed to sharing information.
And now we're going back to Mexico. From Mazatlan, the beautiful city of Mazatlan, comes the following question. Sinaloa State, Mexico. The teamwork represents economic benefits for the members of the team. How can we resolve the problem of the different responsibilities of team members and what is attached to that, which is the salaries in the teamwork? How can we resolve that problem?
Go ahead.
One of the ways is that to make sure that one of the selection criteria includes impact, and this would be described as what positive changes occur in the consequences that were identified at the beginning point for the team. This is the opportunity for everybody in this initial description to identify how are they being harmed, how are they being prevented from carrying out their primary job responsibilities. So on the back end, before you decide to take action, one of the criteria is, will this produce a desired result in terms of minimizing or eliminating these consequences? By having a multifunctional team, you can see to it that all of the consequences for all of the team members are positively influenced.
And now we're going to Oaxaca, and the question is coming from the Federal Commission of Electricity, Oaxaca, Mexico. Buenos días. We are calling from Oaxaca, and the question is as follows. How could we overcome the conditions, the diverse conditions of age and schooling in the formation of self-directed teams, and how can we generate a real participation and convincing them, the higher management, of the benefits of teamwork?
The best way to reconcile those differences that you've just pointed out is initially possibly to do what I would refer to as a needs assessment. And in other words, an assessment needs to be done that measures, for example, variations in age or educational levels, and this can be done either informally or on a formal basis, and then establish a communication strategy towards those people, actually all individuals, that specifies the possible outcomes of using a team approach. If the employees, even if they're of a diverse nature, understand that there could be possible benefits in an ever-changing world, that their jobs would be more secure as, for example, as a result of this, of either being retrained or educated, then that clearly then can be communicated to the management to reveal the potential benefits of using this approach. And I'll say in conclusion to that question, after doing the needs assessment, that really and many times begs the need for specific training. Once you quantify what the needs are, then very specific direction can take place in terms of then what customized training would look like.
And we now send a greeting to our participants in Tecate, Baja California, here on the border with the U.S. And this is a question coming from Tecate. No question? Well, they're off the line, so now we're going to take one coming via fax. Our teams always wind up making proposals that could fix the problems they have assigned, but they always ask for more money or personnel than is realistic for management to provide. How can we avoid this? This is coming from the Tula Tepeji University, Tula de Allende Hidalgo, Mexico.
Here's a situation that proves the need for frequent and directed communications between the teams and their sponsors, and perhaps makes the case for sponsorship. The management individual or group that has put the team together, assigned the issue, as part of its communications needs to be frank as to what are the limits of their resources and their authority. If they will share this with the team initially and recoup it at the point of deciding what action to take, the team can then restrict themselves to choosing solutions or approaches that are compatible with the limitations of their sponsors. I find that the individuals on teams are more than mature enough and pragmatic enough to respect that. As a matter of fact, they're relieved to find what the limitations are so that they do not waste their time or make an emotional investment in approaches that realistically cannot be implemented.
Next question is coming from Lima, Peru, from the National Training Institute and Telecommunications Institute. The question is coming from Lima, Peru. In a company that produces, that has an assembly line, mass production, what would be the role of the self-directed team, and what is their interrelationship with the supervisors of the assembly line and the supervisors?
An examination would need to be made into the specific type of production that's being utilized in this case. If it's the management's position that a team approach could provide a viable alternative to the, let's just say, more traditional approach, the work between supervisors and potential team members in a brainstorming session where somebody accustomed to facilitating teaming kinds of discussions could use what I described in the earlier presentation, the comparative imagery model, simply where you say, if we were to look at this from beyond the approach that's typically or that's currently being used, how would that look? As we visualize this, is that going to offer more benefits, both from a supervisory capacity as well as from the actual manufacturing personnel capacity, as they compare the old model and their mental representations against what the new models might be out of the brainstorming session. If there is compatibility, then that would then enter into the next step of actually the implementation process of using a team approach. But again, it would have to be predicated on visualizing whether or not the new model, once they're educated about that, would be compatible with the achievement of the business goals.
Yes, and one clear change in the roles that will occur for the supervisors is that they will be more reliant on their abilities as process managers to help maintain process integrity, as opposed to being as concerned as before on the content that is produced by the process.
Thank you. And now we're going back to Panama, and this next question is coming from the University, Panama, Technological University. We are calling from the Technological University of Panama, and we are calling from the regional center of Azuero. The question is, when you make a decision in the team, the results are not, the outcomes are not those that we had expected, who is to be blamed for the failure of this decision if the manager of the company approved of this decision? Who takes the blame?
That in that case, if the teaming process is used, the blame or needing to create blame, first of all, may not necessarily be a desirable outcome. If the team process has been utilized, and let's say a team makes a particular recommendation behind their analysis of a particular problem, and the management accepts that and then goes forward, and yet the goals are not achieved, then clearly, because of the teaming philosophy, it has to be a shared responsibility in the outcomes. Translated, no singular person under a teaming approach could be necessarily be perceived as the person to be blamed or to be primarily even accountable for this. That's one of the advantages. If there is a problem and the goals are not met, then everybody goes back to the teaming process and again collectively looks at what went wrong in reanalysis of the situation, and then go from there.
Thank you. We're going to Acapulco, Mexico. I'm the president of the National Chamber of Commerce of Acapulco. The question is, my question is, sí, le escuchamos. Can you eliminate the failure of a work of it produced by a team? Pídele que repita la pregunta. Can you repeat the question? Please, que repita la pregunta, por favor.
Se puede eliminar, o sea, es pregunta.
Can you do away with the failure of some team result? A ver.
Sentido de pregunta, no es dubitativo esto. ¿Se puede limitar el fracaso de un trabajo en equipo si el nivel de capacitación es uniforme entre sus miembros?
Can you eliminate the failure of something produced by the team if the level of education of the team members is not is the same? Is the same. Okay. Gracias.
Yes, one of the more critical things for a team to be responsible for is to produce a detailed plan of action prior to beginning to implement their recommendations. This plan of action has two phases in its development. The first is to project what are the broad steps necessary to accomplish the goal, who will be responsible, at what time will it start, and when should each action be completed, as well as what will be the tangible evidence that the step has been carried out successfully. The second phase of failure prevention, if you will, is to subject that plan of action to what is known as plan analysis, wherein you identify what are the most critical steps of the plan, and then, in effect, employ a mini problem-solving cycle to each of those critical steps. As an example, the first step might be to identify what are some of the problems or obstacles that could prevent us from carrying out this critical step. subjecting each of those to a probability and seriousness criteria. How likely is it that the problem would occur? How serious would the problem be if it did occur? Only those that pass muster would be dealt with further, which would begin with what are some of the causes of these problems, how could we prevent them, and then factor those back into the action plan, as well as, if it is critical for this plan to be successful, taking the time now, while you still have the time available, to develop what are some of the contingency steps that we could take if the worst occurs. I've found in my personal practice that the time invested in plan analysis is very worthwhile. It almost makes it impossible for the team to fail.
Desde México, Distrito Federal, nos formula la siguiente pregunta.
From Mexico, the Federal District is coming the following question.
Bueno,
Sí.
buenos días.
Good morning.
Habla el ingeniero Ismael
This
Montoya,
is
de
a
la
question
Comisión Federal
from
de
the
Electricidad,
Federal Commission of
de la
Electricity,
Generación Hidroeléctrica, Ciudad de México.
Mexico City.
Mi pregunta es,
My question
¿qué tan
is,
importante
how
es
important
que los grupos
is it for
estén
the
formados
groups
por
to be
gente
formed by
del
homogeneous
mismo nivel,
people? In other words,
categoría
people who
educativa?
are from the same administrative level or category, to have a homogeneous group.
It's not necessarily critical that in fact be the case. If there are very strong similarities in the business objectives, frequently it requires a heterogeneous group where you'll have supervisors, employees, etc., that provide a multifaceted perspective of the problems to be solved under teaming conditions. So it tends to be more of a heterogeneous problem-solving issue that provides for those kinds of benefits, as opposed to very strict homogeneous groups. Not to say that those aren't plausible under certain workplace conditions, but both can be very favorable.
And at the very least, you need to be careful to see that there will be representatives on the team of the geographical area where the improvements are intended to occur. The composition of the team is very critical in determining where the changes or improvements will occur. They tend to think more in terms of where they actually operate.
And the last question is coming from the private University of Cochabamba, Bolivia.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Universidad Privada Boliviana. Mi nombre es Rolando Sánchez.
My name is Rolando Sanis, and I am a researcher in this university.
¿Qué piensan los expositores
What
de la
do the
situación
expert
de que
speakers
las universidades
believe regarding
son un modelo a
the
seguir en
fact that
cuanto a
universities are a model to be followed and an example of a good organization? They are traditionally horizontal. The teachers, deans, and program heads are all peers. I work with in this environment, and we believe that we need to form teams for research to be successful in this environment.
Yes, I think that there's the potential for the universities or post-secondary education to serve as a good model because of the collaborative approach. Research and effective problem solving, even as applied to business situations, could be very beneficial.
We want to thank the enormous amount of participants that have called from the different places. Unfortunately, we are not able to continue and to take care of all the questions that you are asking. We want to thank Dr. Spain and Dr. Worthington for this participation, and we hope that this video conference has been enjoyable for you. We will continue transmitting programs on the latest in management techniques and systems and global competitiveness. We invite you to participate on March 28 in the next program of our Management in Today's Global Information Village series. Technologies executives must now learn to cope with. We also hope you will join us on May 23rd for the first program in our International Conflict Management series entitled International Negotiation and Conflict, New Resolution Strategies and Techniques. For additional information on the International Training Center's programs, please consult your participant manuals in which you will find the dates and specific topics of this year's programs. On behalf of all of us who collaborate with the International Training Center, I thank you for your participation and interest in today's program. Thank you very much, and see you soon.